Most people think they know how to communicate. They think that because they can speak, they can articulate their thoughts clearly. But here's the brutal truth. 99% of people are walking around with brilliant ideas trapped inside their heads, unable to express them in a way that actually makes an impact. They stumble over their words, lose their train of thought mid-sentence, and watch as their ideas get dismissed or misunderstood. Meanwhile, that 1% who can articulate clearly, they're the ones getting promoted, winning arguments, inspiring others, and basically running the world. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how to join that elite 1%. These aren't just communication tips. These are the secret frameworks that transform your thoughts into verbal gold. Chapter 1. The Mental Framework Shift. Before we dive into techniques, you need to understand why most people struggle with articulation in the first place. It's not because they lack intelligence or good ideas. It's because they have the wrong mental framework about what communication actually is. Most people think communication is about downloading their thoughts directly from their brain to someone else's brain. They believe that if they just say what they're thinking, the other person will automatically understand. This is completely wrong, and it's the root of 90% of communication failures. Clear articulation starts with understanding that communication is not about you. It's about your audience. Your job isn't to express your thoughts exactly as they exist in your head. Your job is to translate your thoughts into a format that works for the specific person you're talking to. Think of yourself as a translator, not a transmitter. A good translator doesn't just convert words from one language to another. They convert concepts, cultural contexts, and emotional undertones. That's what you need to do with your ideas. The second mental shift is understanding that clarity comes from simplicity, not complexity. Most people think that using big words and complex sentences makes them sound smarter. In reality, it makes them sound unclear. The smartest people in the world can explain the most complex ideas in simple terms. Einstein didn't become famous by using complicated jargon. He became famous by making complex physics understandable through simple analogies and clear explanations. Your goal should never be to impress people with your vocabulary. It should be to make your ideas so clear that they can't be misunderstood. The third shift is about confidence versus competence. Many people struggle with articulation because they're worried about sounding stupid or being wrong. This anxiety creates a mental traffic jam where your thoughts get stuck trying to be perfect before they come out of your mouth. But here's the secret. Confidence in communication doesn't come from being right all the time. It comes from being clear about what you think and why you think it. When you're clear about your reasoning process, even if your conclusion is wrong, people will respect your thinking and be more likely to engage constructively with your ideas. The fourth mental framework is understanding the difference between thinking and speaking. Most people try to think while they speak, which creates those awkward pauses, filler words, and rambling sentences. Professional speakers and communicators do their thinking before they speak. They use micro-pauses to organize their thoughts, then deliver them in clean, structured packages. This doesn't mean you need to script every conversation, but it does mean you need to get comfortable with brief moments of silence while you organize your thoughts. The final mental shift is about ownership. Most people treat their communication like it's something that happens to them, rather than something they control. They say things like, "I'm not good with words," or "I'm just not a natural speaker," as if communication ability is a fixed trait like height or eye color. But communication is a skill, and like any skill, it can be developed through deliberate practice and the right techniques. The people who articulate clearly didn't magically inherit this ability. They learned specific frameworks and practiced them until they became automatic. Once you make these mental shifts, everything else becomes much easier. You stop trying to be perfect and start trying to be clear. You stop thinking about how you sound and start thinking about how you can be understood. You stop treating communication as a performance and start treating it as a tool for achieving your goals. These mental frameworks are the foundation that everything else is built on, so make sure you really understand them before moving forward. Chapter 2. The Pause Power Method. The fastest way to immediately improve your articulation is to master the strategic use of pauses. Most people are terrified of silence in conversation. They think that any gap in speech makes them look stupid or unprepared. This fear drives them to fill every moment with words, even when they don't have clear thoughts to express. The result is rambling, incoherent speech filled with filler words like like, and you know. Professional communicators understand that pauses are not empty space to be feared. They're powerful tools to be wielded strategically. The first type of pause is the thinking pause. This is a deliberate moment of silence before you begin speaking, used to organize your thoughts and choose your words carefully. Instead of starting to talk the moment someone finishes their sentence, take a breath and think for 1 to 3 seconds. This might feel like an eternity to you, but to your listener, it signals that you're taking their question seriously and preparing a thoughtful response. During this pause, quickly organize your main point and decide how you want to structure your answer. This simple habit will eliminate 80% of your verbal stumbles and make you sound significantly more intelligent and prepared. The second type is the emphasis pause. This is a brief silence used to highlight important points and give your listener time to absorb what you've just said. After you make a key statement, pause for 1 to 2 seconds before continuing. This creates a moment of focus that draws attention to your important ideas and prevents them from getting lost in a stream of words. Politicians and professional speakers use this technique constantly. When you watch a great speaker, notice how they pause just after making their most important points. They're not hesitating. They're strategically creating emphasis. The third type is the transition pause. This is used to signal that you're moving from one idea to another. Instead of rushing from point to point, pause briefly to let your listener know that you're shifting gears. This helps your audience follow your logic and prevents your ideas from blending together into an incomprehensible mess. The transition pause is especially important when you're explaining complex topics or making multi-part arguments. It's like using paragraph breaks in your speech. The fourth type is the listening pause. This comes after someone else has spoken, and it serves multiple purposes. First, it ensures that the other person has completely finished their thought before you respond. Many people start formulating their response while the other person is still talking, which means they miss important information and often interrupt mid-sentence. Second, the listening pause gives you time to process what was actually said, rather than what you expected to hear. Third, it demonstrates respect for the other person's ideas, which makes them more likely to listen to your response. Here's how to practice the pause power method. Start by becoming aware of your current speech patterns. Record yourself having a conversation or presenting an idea, then listen back and count how many filler words you use and notice where you rush between thoughts. Most people are shocked by how much verbal clutter they produce without realizing it. Next, practice the thinking pause in low-stakes situations. When someone asks you a simple question like, "How was your day?" resist the urge to immediately respond. Take a breath, organize your thoughts, then give a clear, structured answer. This might feel awkward at first, but it will quickly become natural. For the emphasis, pause. Practice reading speeches by great communicators out loud, paying attention to where they place their pauses for maximum effect. Then, practice incorporating these patterns into your own speech. When you're making a point you want people to remember, state it clearly. Pause for emphasis. Then, continue. For transition pauses, practice explaining complex topics where you need to move between different ideas. Use phrases like, "Now, here's the important part," followed by a pause. Or, "Let me give you another example," with a brief silence before continuing. The key to mastering pauses is understanding that silence is not the enemy of communication. It's one of your most powerful tools. When you remove the fear of brief silences, you give yourself the space to think clearly and express yourself with precision. Your listeners will perceive you as more thoughtful, confident, and intelligent, simply because you take the time to organize your thoughts before speaking them. Chapter 3. Building your internal vocabulary arsenal. Most people have a much larger passive vocabulary than active vocabulary. They can understand thousands of words when reading or listening, but they only use a fraction of those words when speaking. This limited active vocabulary forces them to use imprecise, generic terms that fail to capture the nuance of their thoughts. Building a robust active vocabulary is like upgrading from a basic toolbox to a professional workshop. You'll be able to express subtle distinctions, convey exact meanings, and communicate with precision that makes your ideas impossible to misunderstand. The first step is understanding the difference between knowing a word and being able to use a word effectively in conversation. Knowing a word means you can recognize its meaning when you encounter it. Using a word effectively means you understand its connotations, its appropriate contexts, and how it fits with other words to create precise meaning. For example, most people know the words confident, arrogant, and self-assured, but they might not understand the subtle differences between them or know when to use each one for maximum accuracy. The vocabulary building system that works best for improving articulation is called active integration. Instead of trying to memorize lists of impressive-sounding words, you focus on expanding your ability to express specific types of ideas with precision. Start by identifying the topics you discuss most frequently in your personal and professional life. These might include emotions, business concepts, relationships, technology, or creative projects. For each topic area, build a collection of precise words and phrases that allow you to express subtle distinctions. For emotions, instead of always using basic words like good, bad, happy, or sad, develop a vocabulary that captures specific emotional states. Instead of saying, "I'm frustrated," you might say, I'm exasperated by the repeated delays, or I'm perplexed by the contradictory instructions. Instead of, that's interesting, you could say, that's fascinating, that's intriguing, that's illuminating, or that's thought-provoking, depending on the exact type of interest you want to convey. Each word carries slightly different implications and creates a more precise picture in your listener's mind. For business and professional contexts, precise vocabulary helps you sound competent and builds credibility with colleagues. Instead of saying, "We should do this differently," you might say, "We should optimize this process." "We should pivot our approach," or "We should streamline these procedures." Each version communicates not just a desire for change, but a specific type of change with different implications and expectations. The key to building active vocabulary is the replacement method. Instead of trying to add new words on top of your current speech patterns, identify the generic words you overuse and systematically replace them with more precise alternatives. Most people overuse words like thing, stuff, good, bad, interesting, nice, and really. Every time you catch yourself about to use one of these generic terms, pause and ask yourself what you really mean. What specific type of thing are you referring to? What particular kind of good are you describing? Practice this replacement method by having vocabulary challenges with yourself. For 1 week, try to avoid using the word interesting and instead use more precise alternatives like compelling, surprising, clever, innovative, or contradictory. For another week, eliminate really as an intensifier and use more specific language. Instead of really good, say exceptional, outstanding, or remarkable. Instead of really bad, say terrible, inadequate, or problematic. Another powerful technique is analogy collection. Start noticing when other people use particularly effective analogies or metaphors to explain complex ideas and add these to your mental collection. Analogies are one of the most powerful tools for clear communication because they help your listener understand new concepts by relating them to familiar experiences. Build a collection of analogies for common concepts in your field. If you work in technology, collect analogies that help non-technical people understand technical concepts. If you work in finance, collect analogies that make financial concepts accessible to people without financial backgrounds. The final component of vocabulary building is precision practice. Choose one conversation each day and focus entirely on word choice precision. Before speaking, ask yourself, is this the most accurate word for what I mean? Could I choose a word that creates a clearer picture? Am I being as specific as possible? This deliberate practice will gradually make precision automatic in all your conversations. Remember that the goal isn't to sound sophisticated or to impress people with big words. The goal is to be able to express exactly what you mean, so that your listener understands precisely what you intend to communicate. A rich vocabulary is like having a high-resolution camera instead of a blurry one. The same scene becomes much clearer and more detailed when you have the right tools to capture and convey it. Chapter 4. The structure formula that never fails. The difference between people who communicate clearly and those who don't often comes down to structure. Clear communicators organize their thoughts before they speak, while unclear communicators try to organize their thoughts while speaking. This creates the difference between a well-planned journey and wandering around lost. The good news is that there are proven structural formulas that work in almost every communication situation. Once you master these frameworks, you'll never again find yourself rambling without a clear destination. The most versatile structure is the PREP formula. Point, reason, example, point. This works for everything from answering interview questions to making arguments in meetings to explaining your opinions in casual conversations. You start by stating your main point clearly and concisely. Then you give the primary reason why this point is valid or important. Next, you provide a specific example that illustrates your reasoning. Finally, you restate your point to reinforce it and create closure. This structure keeps you focused, helps your listener follow your logic, and ensures that your main message is clear and memorable. Here's how PREP works in practice. Let's say someone asks you about your opinion on remote work. Using PREP, you might say, "I think remote work is more effective than office work for most knowledge workers." Point. The main reason is that it eliminates commute time and office distractions, allowing people to focus on deep work during their most productive hours. Reason. For example, since my company went remote, I've been able to start my most challenging projects at 7 a.m. when my energy is highest, instead of spending that time in traffic and arriving at the office mentally drained. Example. So, overall, I believe remote work leads to higher productivity and better work quality for most people. Point restatement. For more complex topics, use the layered PREP approach. Start with your overarching point. Then use mini PREP sequences for each supporting argument. This creates a nested structure that can handle sophisticated ideas while maintaining clarity. For instance, if you're arguing for a new business strategy, your main PREP might be that the strategy will increase profitability. Then you'd have supporting PREPs for how it will reduce costs, increase revenue, and improve efficiency, each with its own reason and example. The second essential structure is the chronological framework, which is perfect for explaining processes, telling stories, or describing how something developed over time. The key is to use clear transition phrases that help your listener follow the sequence. Words like first, then, after that, meanwhile, finally, and ultimately create a roadmap that prevents confusion. When using chronological structure, resist the urge to jump around in time or to add background information that disrupts the flow. If context is needed, provide it at the beginning, before starting the chronological sequence. The third structure is the problem-solution framework. This is incredibly powerful for persuasive communication because it mirrors how people naturally think about challenges. Start by clearly describing the problem in terms that your audience can relate to and understand. Make the problem feel real and urgent. Then introduce your solution, explaining specifically how it addresses the core issues you've identified. Finally, address potential objections or concerns about your solution. This structure works whether you're proposing a new project at work, suggesting a change in family plans, or trying to convince a friend to try a new restaurant. The fourth structure is the comparison framework, which is ideal when you need to help someone choose between options or understand relative merits. Set up the criteria for comparison first, so your audience knows what factors matter most. Then systematically compare the options across each criterion. For example, if you're recommending a software tool, you might compare options based on cost, ease of use, features, and customer support. Present information about each option in the same order for every criterion, which makes the comparison easy to follow and reduces cognitive load for your listener. The fifth structure is the cause and effect framework, which is essential for explaining why things happen or predicting what will happen under certain conditions. Start with the situation or conditions you want to explain. Then systematically work through the causal chain. Use clear language to indicate causal relationships, because, as a result, this leads to, consequently, and therefore. Be careful to distinguish between correlation and causation, and acknowledge when you're making predictions rather than describing proven relationships. To practice these structures, start by choosing one framework and using it intentionally in conversations for a full week. Pay attention to how it feels to have a clear structure guiding your communication, and notice how people respond differently when your thoughts are well organized. Record yourself explaining complex topics using different structures. Then, listen back to evaluate which frameworks work best for different types of content. The secret to mastering structural communication is preparation. For important conversations, briefly outline your main points and choose your structure in advance. For impromptu discussions, learn to quickly select an appropriate framework based on what type of response is needed. With practice, this becomes automatic, and you'll find yourself naturally organizing your thoughts into clear, logical structures that make your ideas easy to follow and remember. Chapter 5. Reading the room like a master. Even the most perfectly crafted message will fail if it doesn't match your audience's needs, expectations, and current mental state. Master communicators are like skilled musicians who can adjust their performance based on the acoustics of the room and the mood of the audience. They read subtle cues about what their listeners need to hear, how they need to hear it, and when they're ready to hear it. This ability to adapt your communication style in real time is what separates good communicators from truly exceptional ones. Reading the room starts before you even begin speaking. Look for context clues about your audience's current state, their relationship to the topic, and what they're hoping to get from the conversation. Are they stressed and looking for quick answers, or do they have time for a detailed explanation? Are they familiar with the topic, or do you need to start with basic concepts? Are they excited about the subject, skeptical, or completely neutral? These factors should fundamentally shape how you approach your communication. The first layer of room reading is energy matching. If your audience is high energy and excited, match that enthusiasm in your tone and pace. If they're tired or stressed, adopt a calmer, more measured approach. If they're focused and serious, eliminate casual jokes and get straight to the point. This doesn't mean being fake or manipulative. It means being socially intelligent about how your communication style affects others. Think of it as speaking the same emotional language as your audience. The second layer is knowledge calibration. One of the biggest communication mistakes is misjudging your audience's level of expertise. If you explain basic concepts to experts, you'll bore them and waste their time. If you use advanced concepts with beginners, you'll confuse them and lose their attention. Develop the skill of quickly assessing knowledge levels through strategic questions and careful observation of responses. When in doubt, Start with simpler explanations and add complexity based on how well your audience follows along. Pay attention to attention signals throughout your communication. When people are engaged, they maintain eye contact, nod appropriately, ask relevant questions, and their body language is open and oriented toward you. When they're losing interest, they start checking their phones, their eyes wander, they shift positions frequently, or they ask questions that show they've missed important points. When you notice attention dropping, don't just continue with your planned approach. Pause and adjust. Ask a question to re-engage them, change your pace, or summarize your key points more concisely. Master the art of reading comprehension signals. When people understand what you're saying, their facial expressions show recognition and their questions build on your points. When they're confused, they might nod politely but ask questions that miss the mark. Or they might look puzzled even while trying to appear engaged. If you're not sure whether someone understands, don't ask, "Does that make sense?" Because most people will say yes even when they're confused. Instead, ask them to explain the concept back to you in their own words. Or ask them how they might apply the information to their specific situation. Emotional state reading is crucial for timing your communication effectively. If someone is upset, anxious, or angry, they're not in an optimal state to process complex information or make important decisions. In these situations, focus first on addressing their emotional needs before trying to communicate your main message. This might mean acknowledging their concerns, validating their feelings, or simply waiting for a better time to have the conversation. Pushing forward with your agenda when someone is emotionally overwhelmed usually backfires. Cultural and professional context reading involves understanding the unwritten rules of different environments. Communication that works perfectly in a casual setting might be completely inappropriate in a formal business meeting. Language that's effective with peers might not work with senior executives or with people from different cultural backgrounds. Develop sensitivity to these contextual factors and adjust your vocabulary, tone, examples, and structure accordingly. Practice room reading by becoming a careful observer in group conversations. Before you speak, spend time watching how others respond to different communication styles. Notice which approaches generate engagement and which ones fall flat. Pay attention to the subtle signals people send when they're interested, confused, bored, or ready to move on. This observation practice will sharpen your ability to read these signals in your own conversations. The advanced skill of room reading is learning to guide the emotional and intellectual state of your audience. Instead of just adapting to what you find, you can gradually shift the energy and focus in the direction that will make your communication most effective. If people seem scattered, you can use your structure and pace to help them focus. If they seem skeptical, you can acknowledge their concerns and systematically address them. If they seem overwhelmed, you can break complex ideas into smaller, more digestible pieces. Remember that reading the room is not about manipulating people or telling them what they want to hear. It's about being emotionally intelligent enough to communicate in ways that actually serve their needs and help them understand your message. When you match your communication style to your audience's current state and needs, you're not being fake, you're being effective. Chapter 6. Eliminating verbal clutter forever. The fastest way to sound more intelligent and confident is to eliminate the verbal clutter that dilutes your message and makes you sound uncertain. Most people are completely unaware of how much unnecessary language they use. They pepper their speech with filler words, hedge phrases, and meaningless qualifiers that undermine their credibility and make their ideas harder to follow. Professional communicators speak with surgical precision, using only words that serve a specific purpose. Every word earns its place in the sentence. Filler words are the most obvious form of verbal clutter. These are sounds and words like like, you know, sort of, kind of, and basically, that people use to fill silence while they think. These words serve no communicative purpose and actually work against you by making you sound unprepared, uncertain, or younger than you are. The first step in eliminating filler words is becoming aware of which ones you use most frequently. Most people have 2 or 3 favorite fillers that they rely on unconsciously. To identify your personal filler patterns, record yourself speaking for 10 minutes about a topic you know well. Count every instance of filler words and note which ones you use most often. You'll probably be shocked by the frequency. The average person uses a filler word every 7 to 10 words, which means they're essentially injecting meaningless sounds into every sentence. Once you know your specific patterns, you can target them for elimination. The replacement strategy for filler words is strategic silence. Instead of saying when you need to think, simply pause silently. This feels awkward at first because most people have trained themselves to fear silence. But silent pauses actually make you sound more thoughtful and confident. Practice this by having conversations where you deliberately catch yourself before using filler words and replace them with brief pauses instead. Start with low-stakes conversations and gradually work up to more important situations. Hedge phrases are another form of verbal clutter that makes you sound uncertain even when you're not. These are phrases like, I think, maybe, sort of, kind of, I guess, probably, and I'm not sure. But, while appropriate humility has its place, excessive hedging makes you sound like you don't believe in your own ideas. Most people hedge far more than necessary because they're afraid of sounding too confident or being wrong. The key is learning to distinguish between appropriate uncertainty and unnecessary hedging. If you genuinely don't know something, it's perfectly appropriate to say so directly. I don't have that information, or I'm not familiar with that topic. But if you do have knowledge or opinions, state them clearly, without unnecessary qualifiers. Instead of, I kind of think that maybe we should probably consider doing this differently, say, I think we should change our approach, or I recommend we try a different method. Redundant intensifiers are words like very, really, totally, absolutely, completely, and extremely that people use to add emphasis, but often have the opposite effect. When you constantly intensify your language, the intensifiers lose their power, and your speech sounds overdramatic or desperate for attention. Strong, precise words don't need intensifiers. Instead of saying, really good, choose a word that inherently conveys the level of quality you mean excellent, outstanding, or remarkable. Practice the intensifier elimination challenge by going 1 week without using any intensifying words. This forces you to choose more precise vocabulary and helps you realize how often you rely on these crutch words. You'll find that your speech becomes cleaner and more powerful when you let strong words stand on their own. Unnecessary qualifiers are phrases that dilute your message without adding meaningful information. These include, to be honest, in my opinion, personally, I think, and if I'm being completely frank. These phrases are redundant because everything you say is inherently your opinion unless you specify otherwise. They also subtly suggest that you might not always be honest or that this opinion is somehow different from your usual thoughts. Weak openings are another form of verbal clutter that undermines your credibility from the first words out of your mouth. Many people start their responses with phrases like, well, so, I guess, or, okay. These openings make you sound tentative and unprepared. Practice starting your responses with your first substantive word. If someone asks for your opinion, start immediately with your main point rather than easing into it with weak opening phrases. The elimination process should be gradual and systematic. Choose one type of verbal clutter to focus on each week. Week 1 might be filler words. Week 2 could be hedge phrases. Week 3 might be unnecessary intensifiers. This focused approach prevents you from becoming overwhelmed while trying to change everything at once. It also allows you to develop new neural pathways for cleaner speech patterns. Practice the pause and rephrase technique during casual conversations. When you catch yourself using verbal clutter, pause briefly and then rephrase your sentence cleanly. For example, if you say, I think maybe we should, probably try a different approach, pause and then say, let me rephrase that. I recommend we try a different approach. This practice helps you develop awareness and builds new habits while showing others that you care about clear communication. The advanced technique is preventive thinking. Before you speak, especially in important conversations, take a moment to organize your main point and choose your first words carefully. This preparation eliminates the need for filler words because you know where you're going with your statement. The brief thinking pause becomes a powerful tool for ensuring that your first attempt at expressing an idea is clean and clear. Remember that the goal isn't to sound robotic or overly formal. Natural speech includes some variation and personality. The goal is to eliminate the unconscious verbal clutter that serves no purpose and makes your ideas harder to understand. When you speak with precision, people focus on your ideas rather than being distracted by meaningless words and sounds. Chapter 7. The Storytelling Advantage. Humans are hardwired to pay attention to stories. While facts and statistics can inform people, stories persuade them, inspire them, and make information memorable. Master communicators understand that the most powerful way to make a point is often through narrative rather than direct argument. When you learn to weave stories into your communication, you transform dry information into engaging experiences that stick with your audience long after the conversation ends. The fundamental power of stories lies in their ability to create emotional connection and mental simulation. When someone hears a well-told story, their brain doesn't just process the information, it actually simulates the experience. They imagine themselves in the situation, feel the emotions of the characters, and mentally rehearse the lessons embedded in the narrative. This makes stories far more persuasive and memorable than abstract arguments or data points. The basic story structure that works for most communication situations is the challenge-action-result framework. Start by describing a specific situation or challenge that your audience can relate to. Then explain the actions that were taken to address the challenge. Finally, reveal the results and the lesson or insight that emerged. This structure works whether you're telling a 30-second anecdote or a 5-minute detailed story. Personal stories are often the most powerful because they demonstrate your direct experience and build credibility. When you tell a story about something that happened to you, people understand that you've actually lived through the situation rather than just theorizing about it. These stories should highlight moments of learning, growth, or insight. They don't need to be dramatic or extraordinary. They just need to be genuine and relevant to the point you're making. The key to effective personal stories is vulnerability balanced with strength. Share moments when you faced challenges, made mistakes, or learned important lessons. But frame these experiences in terms of growth and insight, rather than failure or weakness. For example, instead of just saying, "I failed at my first business," you might say, "When my first business failed, I learned that market research isn't optional, it's essential. That hard lesson shaped how I approach every new project now." Professional stories help you illustrate business concepts and share best practices in a way that feels concrete rather than theoretical. These might be stories about successful projects, challenging clients, innovative solutions, or lessons learned from failures. The goal is to help your audience understand not just what happened, but why it matters, and how they can apply similar thinking to their own situations. Observational stories are about things you've witnessed or learned from others. These are particularly useful when you want to make a point, but don't have direct personal experience with the situation. You might tell a story about something you observed at another company, read about in a case study, or learned from a mentor. These stories help you share lessons and insights without claiming experiences you haven't had. The detail selection principle is crucial for effective storytelling. Include sensory details and specific information that helps your audience visualize the situation, but avoid unnecessary information that distracts from your main point. Good storytellers paint just enough of a picture to make the story vivid without getting bogged down in irrelevant details. Focus on details that support your main message or help your audience understand why the situation was significant. Emotional arc management involves taking your audience through a journey of emotions that supports your message. This doesn't mean manipulating people's feelings. It means helping them understand the emotional significance of the events you're describing. A good story might start with excitement or optimism, move through challenge or uncertainty, and end with resolution or insight. This emotional journey helps people remember the story and understand why it matters. The relevance bridge is how you connect your story to your main point without being heavy-handed about it. Some stories are obviously relevant and don't need much explanation. Others require you to explicitly draw the connection between the narrative and your message. Practice smooth transitions like, "The reason I tell you this story is," or "What this taught me about leadership is." These bridges help your audience understand why the story matters. To the current conversation, story length calibration depends on your audience and context. In casual conversation, most stories should be 30 seconds to 2 minutes. In presentations or formal settings, you might have room for longer narratives. Pay attention to your audience's attention signals and learn to adjust your story length accordingly. It's better to tell a shorter, focused story than to lose your audience with unnecessary details. Practice collecting stories that illustrate different types of points you commonly make. Build a mental library of narratives that demonstrate concepts like leadership, teamwork, innovation, persistence, learning from failure, customer service, and problem-solving. When you have ready examples for common themes, you can use stories spontaneously in conversations without having to think of examples on the spot. The story stacking technique involves using multiple short stories to build a stronger case than any single narrative could make alone. Instead of one long story, you might tell 3 brief examples that illustrate the same point from different angles. This provides multiple forms of evidence while keeping each individual story concise and focused. Remember that the best stories are often simple ones that illustrate universal truths or common experiences. You don't need dramatic adventures or extraordinary circumstances to tell effective stories. Sometimes the most powerful narratives are about everyday moments that reveal important insights about human nature, work, relationships, or personal growth. Chapter 8. Handling Resistance and Difficult Conversations. The ultimate test of your articulation skills comes when you face resistance, disagreement, or emotionally charged conversations. Anyone can communicate clearly when everyone agrees and the stakes are low. But master communicators maintain their clarity and effectiveness even when dealing with hostile audiences, strong disagreements, or highly emotional situations. These challenging conversations are where clear articulation becomes a superpower that can de-escalate conflicts, find common ground, and achieve positive outcomes. The first principle of handling resistance is understanding that it's rarely about you personally. When someone disagrees with your ideas or challenges your proposals, they're usually protecting their own interests, expressing their values, or working with different information than you have. Taking resistance personally creates an emotional reaction that clouds your thinking and makes clear communication impossible. Instead, approach resistance with curiosity about the underlying concerns that are driving the disagreement. The listening-first strategy is counterintuitive but incredibly powerful. When someone is pushing back against your ideas, your instinct might be to argue harder or present more evidence. But resistance often comes from feeling unheard or misunderstood. Before you try to address objections, make sure you fully understand what they are. Ask clarifying questions, paraphrase what you've heard, and demonstrate that you're genuinely trying to understand their perspective. This approach often reduces the emotional intensity of disagreements and creates space for productive dialogue. The acknowledgement technique involves explicitly recognizing the validity of someone's concerns before addressing them. This doesn't mean agreeing with everything they say, but it does mean showing that you understand their point of view and respect their right to hold it. Phrases like, "I can see why that would be concerning. That's a valid point," or "I understand your perspective," signal that you're not dismissing their input. This acknowledgement often reduces defensiveness and makes people more willing to consider your response. Reframing is the skill of taking someone's objection and presenting it in a way that opens up new possibilities for discussion. Instead of directly contradicting their concerns, you help them see the situation from a different angle. For example, if someone says, "This will never work because it's too expensive," you might reframe by saying, "Cost is definitely an important consideration. Let's look at this as an investment question. What would we need to see in terms of results to make this worthwhile?" This reframing acknowledges their concern, while shifting the conversation toward problem-solving rather than position defending. The common ground establishment technique involves identifying areas where you and the other person actually agree, even in the midst of disagreement. Most conflicts have some shared values or goals underneath the surface disagreement. By highlighting these commonalities, you create a foundation for collaborative problem-solving. You might say something like, "I think we both want what's best for the team," or "We're both concerned about quality," before addressing the specific areas where you disagree. Evidence calibration involves adjusting the type and amount of evidence you present based on what kind of person you're dealing with. Some people are convinced by data and logical arguments. Others respond better to stories and examples. Still, others need to see social proof or expert opinions. Pay attention to how someone processes information and adjust your approach accordingly. If logical arguments aren't working, try a different type of evidence, rather than just presenting more of the same. The calm certainty approach is about maintaining a steady, confident tone, even when others become emotional or aggressive. This doesn't mean being cold or dismissive, but it does mean staying centered and focused on the issues rather than getting drawn into emotional drama. Your calm energy can actually help de-escalate tense situations and model the kind of rational discussion you want to have. Practice maintaining this composure by taking deep breaths, speaking slightly slower than usual, and keeping your voice tone steady. Question-based redirection is a technique for moving difficult conversations in a more productive direction. Instead of making statements that people can argue with, ask questions that help everyone think more clearly about the situation. Questions like, "What would need to be true for this to work?" Or, "What are our alternatives if we don't do this?" Or, "What information would help us make the best decision?" Shift the focus from defending positions to collaborative problem-solving. The broken record technique is useful when someone keeps bringing up the same objection repeatedly or trying to sidetrack the conversation. You calmly and consistently return to your main point without getting drawn into endless back and forth about peripheral issues. You might say something like, "I understand your concern about timing, and that's something we can address. Let's first make sure we're aligned on whether this is the right direction to pursue." Then, no matter how they respond, you guide the conversation back to the core issue. Emotional regulation under pressure is perhaps the most important skill for difficult conversations. When you feel yourself getting angry, frustrated, or defensive, your ability to think clearly and articulate effectively diminishes rapidly. Practice recognizing the early signs of emotional arousal in yourself: faster heartbeat, tension in your shoulders, changes in your breathing, or the urge to interrupt. When you notice these signs, take a moment to pause, breathe deeply, and remind yourself of your goals for the conversation. The strategic concession approach involves identifying points where you can genuinely agree or compromise without undermining your main objectives. Sometimes giving ground on smaller issues makes it easier for the other person to be flexible on larger ones. This isn't about being weak or giving up on your principles. It's about being strategic, about where to focus your energy and influence. Preparation for difficult conversations involves anticipating likely objections and thinking through how you'll address them. This doesn't mean scripting every response, but it does mean considering what concerns the other person might have and how you can address those concerns constructively. This preparation helps you stay focused and articulate even when the conversation becomes challenging. Remember that the goal of handling resistance isn't to win every argument or convince everyone to agree with you. The goal is to have productive conversations that move things forward, maintain relationships, and find solutions that work for everyone involved. Sometimes, the best outcome is agreeing to disagree while maintaining mutual respect and finding ways to work together despite different perspectives. Chapter 9. Mastering Voice, Tone, and Delivery. Your ideas might be brilliant and your structure might be perfect, but if your voice, tone, and delivery don't support your message, you'll still fail to communicate effectively. The way you sound is just as important as what you say. Your vocal qualities convey confidence, competence, and credibility before people even process your words. Master communicators understand that their voice is an instrument that needs to be deliberately tuned and skillfully played to achieve maximum impact. Vocal authority comes from several technical elements that you can learn to control. The first is breath support, which affects everything else about how you sound. Most people breathe shallowly from their chest, which creates a thin, weak voice that lacks power and presence. Professional speakers breathe deeply from their diaphragm, which produces a fuller, more resonant sound that naturally commands attention. Practice diaphragmatic breathing by placing one hand on your chest and one on your stomach. When you breathe correctly for speaking, your stomach hand should move more than your chest hand. Pace control is crucial for maintaining listener attention and ensuring comprehension. Most people speak too quickly when they're nervous, and too slowly when they're uncertain. The optimal speaking pace varies depending on your audience and content, but generally falls between 140 and 180 words per minute for most business communication. Practice varying your pace strategically. Slow down for important points to ensure they land with impact, and speed up slightly during background information or familiar concepts to maintain energy. Volume modulation doesn't just mean speaking loudly enough to be heard. It means using strategic changes in volume to create emphasis and maintain interest. Professional speakers raise their volume slightly for important points and lower it for intimate or dramatic moments. They understand that contrast captures attention better than constant loudness. Practice using volume changes to highlight key information and create vocal variety that keeps listeners engaged. Pitch variation prevents the monotone delivery that puts audiences to sleep. Your natural speaking pitch should be neither artificially high nor unnaturally low, but somewhere in the middle of your comfortable range. From this baseline, vary your pitch to convey different types of information and emotions. Rising pitch often indicates questions or uncertainty, while falling pitch suggests statements and confidence. Practice reading content aloud while consciously varying your pitch to match the meaning and emotion of your words. Resonance and timbre are the qualities that make some voices naturally more pleasing and authoritative than others. These characteristics are largely determined by how you use your resonating chambers, your chest, throat, and head. A voice that resonates primarily in the chest tends to sound deeper and more authoritative. A voice that resonates mainly in the head tends to sound thinner and less powerful. Practice speaking with good posture and an open throat to allow your natural resonance to emerge fully. Articulation precision ensures that every word you speak is clearly understood. This goes beyond just pronouncing words correctly. It involves crisp consonants clear vowels, and proper word endings. Many people mumble or drop word endings, especially when they speak quickly or feel uncertain. Practice exaggerating your articulation during practice sessions to develop muscle memory for clear speech. Read tongue twisters and complex passages aloud to improve your precision and agility. Strategic pausing, which we discussed earlier, becomes even more powerful when combined with proper vocal delivery. The pause gives your previous statement time to resonate, both literally and figuratively. It also builds anticipation for what comes next. Practice using pauses of different lengths for different purposes. Brief pauses for emphasis. Longer pauses for dramatic effect or to allow complex information to be processed. Vocal energy matching involves adjusting your overall vocal intensity to match the situation and your audience's energy level. A high-energy presentation requires more vocal dynamism than an intimate conversation. But energy isn't the same as volume. You can speak quietly and still convey high energy through pace, pitch variation, and vocal quality. Practice calibrating your vocal energy to different contexts and audiences. Eliminating vocal fillers like ah, and you, no, requires not just awareness, but also vocal alternatives. Instead of filling silence with meaningless sounds, learn to use strategic pauses or transition phrases like, "The key point is," "What's important to understand is," or "Let me put this another way." These phrases give you time to think while maintaining vocal flow and actually adding value to your communication. Emotional congruence means ensuring that your vocal qualities match the emotional content of your message. If you're discussing something serious with a light, cheerful tone, or presenting exciting opportunities with a flat, monotone delivery, your mixed signals will confuse your audience and undermine your credibility. Practice delivering the same content with different emotional tones to understand how vocal qualities affect message reception. Vocal warm-ups before important conversations or presentations can dramatically improve your performance. Just like athletes warm up their bodies, speakers should warm up their voices. Simple exercises like humming, lip trills, tongue twisters, and vocal scales help prepare your speech muscles for optimal performance. Even 5 minutes of vocal warm-up can make a noticeable difference in how you sound. Posture and physical positioning directly affect your vocal quality. Standing or sitting up straight opens your airways and allows for better breath support. Slouching compresses your diaphragm and creates a weaker voice. Your head position also matters. Looking down restricts your vocal cords, while an overly raised chin can create tension. Practice speaking with optimal posture. Shoulders back, spine straight, chin parallel to the ground. Recording and playback analysis is essential for developing vocal awareness. Most people have very little objective sense of how they actually sound to others. Record yourself speaking in different contexts and listen for patterns in your vocal qualities. Do you speak too quickly when nervous? Do you drop in volume at the end of sentences? Do you have distracting vocal habits you're unaware of? This objective feedback is invaluable for targeted improvement. Microphone and amplification skills are increasingly important in our digital communication age. Whether you're on video calls, recording content, or speaking with amplification, understanding how to work with audio technology enhances your vocal effectiveness. Practice positioning yourself correctly relative to microphones, projecting appropriately for different audio setups, and maintaining consistent vocal levels. The ultimate goal of vocal mastery is to make your voice a transparent vehicle for your ideas rather than a distraction from them. When your vocal delivery is skilled and appropriate, people focus on your message rather than how you're delivering it. Your voice becomes a powerful tool that enhances your credibility, clarifies your meaning, and engages your audience's attention and emotions in service of your communication goals. Chapter 10. Building Unshakable Confidence. Confidence is the foundation that supports every other articulation skill. You can master all the techniques in the world, but if you don't believe in yourself and your right to be heard, your communication will lack the power and presence that makes people want to listen. True confidence in communication isn't about arrogance or pretending to know everything you don't. It's about having genuine self-assurance in your ability to express your thoughts clearly and contribute meaningfully to conversations. The first step in building communication confidence is understanding the difference between confidence and competence. Many people think they need to be experts on every topic before they can speak confidently about anything. This is completely backwards. Confidence comes from being comfortable with the boundaries of your knowledge and being able to articulate what you do know clearly while acknowledging what you don't. A confident communicator can say, "I don't know, but I'll find out," with as much authority as they can share their expertise. Competence building involves systematically expanding your knowledge in areas that matter to your personal and professional goals. This doesn't mean trying to become an expert in everything, but it does mean developing solid understanding in your core areas of responsibility and interest. When you genuinely know your material, confidence becomes much easier because you're not worried about being exposed as unprepared or uninformed. Create a learning plan that helps you deepen your expertise in the topics you discuss most frequently. The preparation principle recognizes that confidence often comes from being well prepared for important conversations. This doesn't mean scripting everything you'll say, but it does mean thinking through key points, anticipating questions or objections, and organizing your thoughts in advance. Even 5 minutes of mental preparation before an important meeting or conversation can dramatically increase your confidence and effectiveness. Professional communicators prepare not because they lack confidence, but because preparation enhances confidence. Reframing internal dialogue is crucial because most communication anxiety comes from negative self-talk rather than external threats. Many people have internal critics that constantly tell them they're not smart enough, experienced enough, or articulate enough to contribute meaningfully to conversations. These internal voices are usually based on past experiences, other people's opinions, or unrealistic standards rather than current reality. Practice recognizing and challenging these negative thoughts with more balanced, realistic assessments. The progressive exposure method involves gradually putting yourself in increasingly challenging communication situations to build confidence through experience. Start with low-stakes conversations where the outcome doesn't matter much, then gradually work up to higher-stakes situations. Each positive experience builds evidence that you can communicate effectively, which increases your confidence for future situations. This is like building physical strength through progressively heavier weights, rather than jumping straight to the maximum load. Success documentation helps you build a realistic sense of your communication abilities by keeping track of positive feedback, successful outcomes, and moments when your communication made a difference. Most people have selective memory that focuses on failures and embarrassing moments while forgetting successes and positive feedback. Keep a record of compliments on your communication, times when your ideas were well received, and situations where your input helped solve problems or advance projects. The mindset shift from perfectionism to effectiveness is essential for communication confidence. Perfectionist thinking tells you that every word must be exactly right, every pause must be perfectly timed, and every response must be brilliant. This creates paralysis and anxiety that actually makes your communication worse. Effectiveness thinking focuses on whether your message was understood, whether you achieved your goals, and whether you contributed positively to the conversation. Effectiveness is much more achievable than perfection. Body language confidence involves using physical presence to support your mental confidence. Stand or sit up straight, make appropriate eye contact, use purposeful gestures, and occupy space in a way that reflects your right to be there. These physical behaviors don't just communicate confidence to others, they actually help you feel more confident internally. Research shows that confident body language can actually change your hormone levels and mental state in ways that enhance performance. Voice confidence, as discussed in the previous chapter, involves using vocal qualities that convey self-assurance. This includes appropriate volume, clear articulation, strategic pausing, and vocal variety. When you sound confident, people are more likely to listen to your ideas seriously, which creates positive feedback that reinforces your actual confidence. Practice speaking with authority even about topics where you feel uncertain, as long as you're honest about the limits of your knowledge. The contribution mindset focuses on what you can offer to conversations rather than what you might lack. Instead of worrying about whether you're smart enough or experienced enough, focus on what perspectives, questions, or ideas you can contribute that might be helpful. Every person brings a unique combination of experiences, knowledge, and viewpoints that can add value to discussions. Your job isn't to be the smartest person in the room. It's to contribute meaningfully from your own perspective and expertise. Risk reframing involves recognizing that the risks of speaking up are usually much smaller than they seem, while the risks of staying silent are often underestimated. Most people overestimate the negative consequences of saying something imperfect and underestimate the positive consequences of contributing their ideas. In reality, people are usually more forgiving of communication mistakes than you think, and they often appreciate contributions that aren't perfect, but are genuine and thoughtful. Learning from setbacks is an essential part of building lasting confidence. Every communicator has moments when they stumble over words, miss important points, or handle situations poorly. Confident communicators treat these experiences as learning opportunities rather than evidence of permanent inadequacy. Analyze what went wrong, identify what you can do differently next time, and then move forward without dwelling on past mistakes. The practice principle recognizes that confidence comes from repetition and familiarity. The more you practice articulating your thoughts in various situations, the more comfortable and confident you become with the process. Look for opportunities to speak up in meetings, contribute to discussions, ask questions, and share your perspectives. Each positive experience builds your confidence muscle and makes the next communication challenge feel less intimidating. Authentic confidence comes from being genuinely yourself, rather than trying to imitate someone else's communication style. While you can learn techniques and strategies from others, your most powerful communication will come from developing your own authentic voice and style. This means being honest about your personality, your values, and your communication preferences, while still working to improve your skills and effectiveness. Remember that confidence is not a fixed trait that some people have and others lack. It's a skill that can be developed through practice, preparation, and positive experiences. Every expert communicator started as a beginner who felt nervous and uncertain. The difference is that they persisted through the discomfort, learned from their experiences, and gradually built the confidence that now seems so natural and effortless. Chapter 11. Advanced Persuasion through Clear Communication. Clear articulation becomes exponentially more powerful when combined with strategic persuasion techniques. Most people think persuasion is about manipulation or high-pressure tactics, but true persuasion is simply about presenting your ideas in ways that make them easy to understand, accept, and act upon. When you master the art of persuasive articulation, you can influence outcomes not through force or deception, but through clarity, logic, and genuine connection with your audience's needs and values. The foundation of persuasive communication is understanding that people are not convinced by what you say. They're convinced by what they understand and believe. This means your job is not to overwhelm them with arguments, but to help them see the logic and value of your position from their own perspective. The most persuasive communicators are those who can articulate ideas in ways that feel like natural conclusions rather than imposed opinions. The reciprocity principle recognizes that people are more likely to accept your ideas when they feel you understand and respect theirs. Start persuasive conversations by acknowledging what the other person values, what concerns they might have, and what outcomes they're hoping to achieve. This doesn't mean agreeing with everything they say, but it does mean demonstrating that you've listened carefully and understand their perspective. When people feel heard and respected, they become much more open to considering new information and alternative viewpoints. The consistency principle leverages people's desire to align their actions with their stated values and previous commitments. Instead of trying to convince someone to adopt entirely new beliefs, help them see how your proposal aligns with principles they already hold. If someone values efficiency, show how your idea improves efficiency. If they prioritize team success, demonstrate how your proposal benefits the team. Frame your arguments in terms of their existing values rather than trying to change those values. Social proof becomes more powerful when articulated clearly and specifically. Instead of making vague claims about what everyone is doing, provide specific examples of people or organizations that your audience respects who have made similar decisions. The key is choosing examples that your specific audience will find credible and relevant. A statistic that impresses one group might be meaningless to another. So calibrate your social proof to match your audience's context and concerns. The authority principle works best when you establish credibility through demonstrated competence rather than claimed expertise. Instead of telling people you're an expert, show them through the quality of your analysis, the depth of your preparation, and the thoughtfulness of your responses to their questions. True authority in communication comes from consistently providing valuable insights and demonstrating genuine understanding of complex issues. Scarcity and urgency must be articulated honestly to be persuasive. If there really are limited opportunities or time constraints, explain these clearly and help people understand the implications of different timing decisions. But manufactured urgency or false scarcity undermines your credibility and destroys trust. People can usually sense when pressure tactics are being used, and they resent being manipulated. Authentic urgency, clearly explained, can motivate action without damaging relationships. The contrast principle involves helping people understand their options by clearly articulating the differences between alternatives. This isn't about making other options look bad. It's about helping people understand the true implications of different choices. Present information objectively, highlight key distinctions, and let people draw their own conclusions about what matters most to them. When you trust your audience to make good decisions with good information, they're more likely to trust your recommendations. Emotional connection through storytelling becomes particularly powerful in persuasive contexts. People make decisions with their emotions and then justify those decisions with logic. By telling stories that help people envision positive outcomes or understand potential consequences, you engage both their emotional and rational decision-making processes. The stories you choose should be relevant, credible, and focused on outcomes that matter to your specific audience. The preemption technique involves addressing likely objections before they're raised. This doesn't mean arguing against positions no one has taken, but it does mean thoughtfully considering what concerns your audience might have and addressing them proactively. This approach demonstrates that you've thought carefully about different perspectives and aren't trying to hide potential drawbacks or complications. When you address concerns before people raise them, you build trust and credibility. Question-based persuasion uses strategic questions to help people think through issues for themselves rather than simply accepting your conclusions. Questions like, "What would need to be true for this to work?" Or, "How do you think our customers would respond to this?" engage people as collaborators in problem-solving rather than targets of persuasion. When people participate in developing the logic behind a decision, they're much more committed to the outcome. The incremental agreement strategy involves building momentum through a series of smaller agreements that lead logically to your main point. Instead of asking for a major commitment up front, start with points of agreement and gradually work toward more significant decisions. Each yes makes the next yes more likely, and by the time you reach your main request, you've already established a pattern of agreement and collaboration. Benefit articulation focuses on outcomes rather than features. Instead of describing what something is, describe what it does and why that matters to the specific person you're talking to. People don't care about technical specifications, they care about how those specifications will improve their lives, solve their problems, or help them achieve their goals. The more specifically you can connect your proposals to their desired outcomes, the more persuasive your communication becomes. Objection handling through clear articulation involves listening carefully to concerns, restating them to ensure understanding, and then addressing them directly and honestly. Don't dismiss objections or try to overwhelm them with counterarguments. Instead, treat them as valuable information that helps you understand what's important to the other person. Sometimes, the best response to an objection is to acknowledge its validity and work together to find solutions that address the underlying concerns. The commitment and consistency follow-through involves helping people articulate their own reasoning for decisions they make. When someone agrees to your proposal, ask them to explain why they think it's a good idea or how they plan to implement it. This process helps them internalize their commitment and makes them more likely to follow through. People are much more committed to decisions they can clearly articulate and defend to themselves and others. Remember that the most powerful persuasion doesn't feel like persuasion at all. It feels like collaborative problem-solving, where you help people understand their options clearly and make decisions that serve their interests. When your persuasive communication is based on genuine understanding of others' needs and honest presentation of information, you build long-term relationships and achieve sustainable influence that benefits everyone involved. Chapter 12. Mastering Digital and Virtual Communication. The rise of digital communication has fundamentally changed how we need to articulate our thoughts. Video calls, recorded presentations, written messages, and virtual meetings all require different articulation strategies than face-to-face conversation. Many of the subtle cues and feedback mechanisms we rely on in person are reduced or eliminated in digital formats, which means you need to be even more intentional and skilled in how you express your ideas to maintain clarity and connection. Video call communication requires heightened awareness of how you appear and sound through technology. The camera creates a more intimate viewing experience than most in-person conversations, which means your facial expressions, eye contact, and upper body language become more important. Position your camera at eye level and look directly into the lens when making important points, rather than looking at the screen. This creates the impression of direct eye contact for your audience and conveys confidence and sincerity. Your vocal qualities become even more critical in virtual settings, because audio quality can be inconsistent and background noise can interfere with comprehension. Speak slightly slower than you would in person, enunciate more clearly, and use more vocal variety to maintain engagement through a potentially flat audio connection. Many people unconsciously lower their energy level on video calls, which can make them sound bored or disengaged. Compensate for this by deliberately increasing your vocal energy and enthusiasm. Lighting and framing affect how your message is received more than most people realize. Poor lighting can make you look tired, unprofessional, or difficult to see clearly, which undermines your credibility regardless of the quality of your content. Position yourself facing a light source, ideally natural light from a window, or invest in a simple ring light or desk lamp. Frame yourself so that your head and shoulders are clearly visible. With a clean, non-distracting background, managing technology distractions requires different strategies than managing in-person interruptions. Mute notifications, close unnecessary applications, and have backup plans for technical failures. When technical issues arise, address them briefly and matter-of-factly, rather than letting them derail your communication. Practice phrases like, "Let me address this technical issue quickly," and then get back to our main discussion, to maintain control and professionalism when technology doesn't cooperate. Screen sharing and presentation skills in virtual environments require more structured communication than traditional presentations. Your audience can't see your body language as clearly and may be dealing with their own distractions, so your verbal communication must carry more of the load. Describe what you're showing more explicitly. Use clear transition phrases when moving between topics, and check for understanding more frequently. Guide your audience's attention by clearly stating what you want them to focus on. Look at the chart in the upper right corner, or the key number to notice is highlighted in blue. Written communication requires a completely different approach to articulation, because you lose all vocal and visual cues. Your word choice, sentence structure, and organization become your only tools for conveying tone, emphasis, and meaning. Write with more precision and clarity than you would speak. Because readers can't ask immediate clarifying questions or rely on your facial expressions to understand your intent. Use formatting tools like bullet points, headers, and bold text strategically to create visual hierarchy and make your key points easy to find. Email articulation demands particular attention to clarity and tone because messages are often read quickly and can be easily misunderstood. Start emails with clear subject lines that accurately summarize the content and purpose. Lead with your main point or request, then provide supporting details. End with specific next steps or clear calls to action. Use professional but warm language that conveys respect and collaboration rather than sounding cold or demanding. Asynchronous communication like recorded videos or voice messages requires you to anticipate questions and provide context that would naturally emerge in conversation. Since your audience can't interrupt with questions or request clarification, you need to be more thorough in your explanations and more explicit about your reasoning. Structure these communications with clear introductions that explain what you'll cover, logical progression through your main points, and summaries that reinforce your key messages. Virtual meeting facilitation demands stronger verbal leadership skills because the usual visual cues for turn-taking and group dynamics are diminished. Use people's names more frequently to direct attention and include specific individuals. Provide clearer verbal transitions between topics and speakers. Check in more explicitly with quieter participants by asking direct questions rather than assuming their silence means agreement or disengagement. Chat and instant messaging require condensed but clear communication. Learn to express complex ideas in shorter formats without losing essential meaning. Use formatting features like line breaks, bold text, and bullet points to make longer messages easier to scan. Be more explicit about tone when necessary, since your usual vocal and facial indicators aren't available. Phrases like, "I'm excited about this opportunity," or "I have some concerns about this approach," help clarify your intent. Time zone and cultural considerations become more complex in global digital communication. Be explicit about timing, deadlines, and cultural context when communicating across different regions. Use specific dates and times rather than relative references like tomorrow or next week. Be sensitive to different communication styles and expectations and adapt your approach accordingly while maintaining your core message clarity. Recording and playback skills are increasingly important as more communication happens through recorded messages, video updates, and asynchronous presentations. Practice speaking to a camera or microphone as if you're talking to a specific person rather than an abstract audience. This creates more engaging and personal communication. Review your recordings before sending them to check for clarity, pace, and technical quality. Digital body language includes elements like response time to messages, emoji usage, and participation patterns in virtual meetings. Be intentional about these signals because they contribute to how your communication is perceived. Respond to messages within reasonable timeframes. Use digital reactions appropriately to show engagement, and participate actively in virtual discussions to demonstrate your involvement and interest. Platform-specific optimization means understanding how different communication tools work best and adjusting your articulation accordingly. LinkedIn posts require different language than Twitter updates. Slack messages need different formatting than formal emails. Video presentations call for different pacing than audio-only conference calls. Learn the conventions and optimal practices for each platform you use regularly. The key to mastering digital communication is recognizing that it's not just face-to-face conversation transmitted through technology. It's a different medium that requires adapted skills and strategies. The principles of clear articulation remain the same, but their application must be modified to work effectively through digital channels. Practice these skills regularly and seek feedback on your digital communication effectiveness, just as you would with any other communication skill. Chapter 13. Adapting your style for different audiences and contexts. True mastery of articulation requires the ability to adapt your communication style to different audiences, situations, and contexts while maintaining your authentic voice and core message. This isn't about being fake or manipulative. It's about being socially intelligent enough to communicate in ways that resonate with your specific audience's needs, expectations, and communication preferences. The most effective communicators are like skilled translators who can express the same ideas in multiple languages and formats. Audience analysis starts before you even begin speaking. Consider who you're communicating with, their level of expertise on your topic, their relationship to the subject matter, their cultural background, their professional context, and their personal communication style preferences. A technical explanation that works perfectly for engineers might confuse executives who need strategic summaries. A casual approach that works with peers might seem unprofessional with senior leadership. Expertise-level calibration is one of the most critical adaptations you'll make. When speaking to experts in your field, you can use technical terminology, assume background knowledge, and focus on nuanced distinctions and advanced concepts. When communicating with beginners, you need to define terms, provide context, use analogies, and build understanding step by step. The key is accurately assessing your audience's knowledge level and adjusting accordingly without being condescending or overwhelming. Professional hierarchy considerations affect not just the formality of your language, but also the structure and focus of your communication. When speaking with senior executives, lead with strategic implications and bottom-line impact, then provide supporting details if requested. When communicating with peers, you can engage in more collaborative discussion and detailed technical analysis. When speaking with junior colleagues, focus on learning opportunities and provide more guidance and context. Cultural adaptation requires sensitivity to different communication norms, values, and expectations. Some cultures value direct, explicit communication, while others prefer indirect, contextual messaging. Some prioritize individual achievement, while others emphasize collective success. Some expect formal protocols, while others prefer casual interaction. Research and observe the cultural norms relevant to your audience, and adjust your approach while remaining authentic to your own style. Industry-specific language and conventions vary significantly across different professional fields. Legal professionals, medical practitioners, technology workers, creative professionals, and financial services experts all have different communication cultures and expectations. Learn the communication norms and terminology relevant to the industries you work with most frequently. This doesn't mean adopting jargon unnecessarily, but it does mean understanding what language will be most clear and credible to your specific audience. Generational differences in communication preferences are increasingly important as workplaces become more age-diverse. Different generations have different expectations about formality, technology use, feedback styles, and communication frequency. Younger professionals might prefer quick, digital updates, while older colleagues might appreciate more detailed, formal communication. Adapt your approach based on what works best for your specific audience, rather than making assumptions based on age alone. Emotional context adaptation involves recognizing the emotional state of your audience and adjusting your communication style accordingly. If people are stressed about deadlines, be more concise and action-oriented. If they're excited about opportunities, match their enthusiasm while providing grounding details. If they're dealing with difficult changes, be more supportive and patient in your communication. Your emotional intelligence should inform how you present information and respond to reactions. High-stakes versus low-stakes communication requires different levels of preparation, formality, and precision. Casual brainstorming sessions allow for more experimental language and incomplete thoughts. Board presentations demand polished, well-structured communication with clear supporting evidence. Crisis communications require calm, authoritative delivery with specific action steps. Calibrate your preparation and delivery style to match the importance and consequences of the communication. Group size considerations affect how you structure and deliver your communication. One-on-one conversations allow for more personal connection and interactive discussion. Small groups enable collaborative dialogue and detailed exploration of ideas. Large audiences require more structured presentation formats with clear main points and engaging delivery techniques. Very large audiences need simplified messages with strong emotional connection and memorable takeaways. Time constraint adaptation means adjusting the depth and structure of your communication based on available time. When time is limited, lead with your most important points and provide supporting details only if time permits. When you have more time available, you can explore topics in greater depth, encourage questions and discussion, and provide comprehensive context. Always respect time boundaries and help your audience understand how you're managing the available time. Medium-specific adaptation acknowledges that different communication channels require different approaches. Face-to-face conversations allow for full use of verbal and non-verbal communication. Phone calls require stronger vocal skills and more explicit verbal cues. Written communication demands more precision and structure. Presentation settings call for more dynamic delivery and visual support. Each medium has its strengths and limitations that should inform your communication strategy. Purpose-driven adaptation means adjusting your style based on what you're trying to accomplish. Informational communication requires clear organization and comprehensive coverage. Persuasive communication demands understanding of audience motivations and strategic presentation of benefits. Inspirational communication calls for emotional connection and compelling vision. Problem-solving communication needs collaborative language and structured analysis. Match your style to your intended outcome. Feedback integration involves paying attention to how your audience responds and adjusting your approach in real time. If people look confused, slow down and provide more explanation. If they seem bored, increase your energy and find ways to make the content more relevant. If they're asking detailed questions, they're ready for more depth. If they're checking phones or looking distracted, simplify your message and refocus their attention. The consistency challenge is maintaining your authentic voice and core personality while adapting to different contexts. You don't want to become a completely different person in each situation, but you do want to present yourself in ways that work best for your specific audience. Think of this as choosing different aspects of your personality to emphasize, rather than creating false personas. Your core values and communication principles should remain consistent, even as your style and approach adapt. Practice adaptation by intentionally communicating about the same topic to different audiences and noticing how you naturally adjust your language, examples, and emphasis. Record these different versions and analyze what changes you made and why. This conscious practice will help you become more skilled at making appropriate adaptations quickly and naturally in real-time communication situations. Chapter 14. The Science of Influence Through Words. Understanding the psychological principles behind how words influence thoughts, emotions, and decisions gives you tremendous power to communicate more effectively and ethically. This isn't about manipulation or trickery. It's about understanding how human psychology works and using that knowledge to craft messages that truly serve your audience's needs while achieving your communication goals. The science of influence helps you choose words and phrases that naturally align with how people process information and make decisions. Cognitive load theory explains why simple, clear communication is more influential than complex, sophisticated language. The human brain has limited processing capacity for new information. When you use unnecessary complexity, technical jargon, or convoluted sentence structures, you consume your audience's mental resources with decoding your message rather than evaluating its merit. Simple, direct language allows people to focus their cognitive energy on understanding and considering your ideas rather than struggling to comprehend what you're saying. The primacy and recency effects demonstrate why your opening and closing statements are disproportionately important. People remember best what they hear first and what they hear last, while information in the middle tends to fade from memory. This means you should front-load your most important points and end with strong, memorable conclusions. Don't bury your key messages in the middle of long explanations where they're likely to be forgotten. Anchoring bias shows how initial information influences all subsequent judgments. The first number, example, or comparison you provide becomes a reference point that shapes how people interpret everything else you say. If you're discussing costs, starting with a higher anchor makes subsequent numbers seem more reasonable. If you're talking about timelines, your initial estimate influences how people perceive alternative proposals. Use this principle ethically by providing realistic, relevant anchors that help people make good decisions. Framing effects reveal how the same information can influence decisions differently, depending on how it's presented. Describing a medical procedure as having a 90% success rate versus a 10% failure rate conveys identical information, but creates different emotional responses. Frame your messages in ways that help people focus on the most relevant aspects for their decision-making needs. Positive framing often motivates action, while negative framing can motivate prevention or caution. The availability heuristic explains why vivid, specific examples are more persuasive than abstract statistics. People judge the likelihood or importance of something based on how easily they can recall examples of it. A compelling story about one person's experience often influences decisions more than statistics about thousands of people. Use concrete, relatable examples to make abstract concepts feel real and relevant to your audience's experience. Loss aversion demonstrates why people are more motivated to avoid losses than to achieve equivalent gains. Phrases like, "Don't miss this opportunity," or "Avoid these common mistakes," tap into this psychological tendency. When appropriate, frame your recommendations in terms of what people might lose by not taking action, rather than only focusing on what they might gain. This approach can be particularly effective for motivating change or urgent action. Social proof mechanisms show how references to others' behavior and choices influence individual decisions. People look to others for guidance about what's normal, appropriate, or effective. Phrases like, "Most of our clients find that," "the majority of teams discover," or "successful companies typically," provide social validation for your recommendations. Choose social proof examples that your specific audience will find credible and relevant. Authority indicators include not just formal titles and credentials, but also demonstrated expertise, confident delivery, and knowledgeable responses to questions. People are more likely to be influenced by sources they perceive as credible authorities. Build your authority through the quality of your preparation, the depth of your knowledge, and your ability to address concerns thoughtfully. Avoid claiming authority you don't have, as this damages credibility when discovered. Commitment and consistency principles leverage people's desire to align their actions with their stated beliefs and previous commitments. When people articulate their own reasoning for decisions or commitments, they become more likely to follow through. Ask questions that help people explain why they think something is important or how they plan to implement changes. Their own words become more influential than your arguments. Reciprocity dynamics suggest that people feel obligated to return favors and positive treatment. This applies to communication through providing value, showing genuine interest in others' perspectives, and offering helpful insights before asking for anything in return. When you consistently provide valuable information and thoughtful analysis, people become more receptive to your recommendations and requests. The contrast principle shows how presenting options in comparison to each other influences which choice seems most attractive. The order in which you present alternatives and the specific comparisons you highlight shape how people evaluate their options. Present information in ways that help people understand the true differences between choices without manipulating them toward inappropriate decisions. Emotional contagion research demonstrates how emotions spread through communication. Your emotional state influences your audience's emotional response, which in turn affects their decision-making. Confident, optimistic communication tends to create confidence and optimism in others. Anxious, uncertain delivery creates anxiety and doubt. Manage your own emotional state to support the outcomes you want to achieve. Neurological research on language processing reveals how certain words and phrases activate different parts of the brain. Action verbs engage motor cortex regions. Sensory language activates sensory processing areas, and emotional words stimulate limbic system responses. Use varied language that engages multiple brain regions to create more memorable and impactful communication. Cognitive biases like confirmation bias, where people preferentially process information that confirms their existing beliefs, affect how your messages are received. Present information in ways that connect to your audience's existing knowledge and values, rather than challenging their fundamental worldview unnecessarily. When you do need to present contrary information, acknowledge their perspective first and explain your reasoning carefully. The spacing effect shows that information repeated across multiple communications is retained better than information presented only once. Important messages benefit from strategic repetition across different contexts and conversations. This doesn't mean saying the exact same thing repeatedly, but rather reinforcing key concepts through different examples, applications, and perspectives. Ethical application of influence science requires using these principles to help people make decisions that truly serve their interests, not to manipulate them for your benefit. The goal should be clearer communication and better decision-making, not getting people to do things that aren't in their best interest. When you use psychological principles ethically, you build trust and achieve sustainable influence that benefits everyone involved. Understanding influence science also helps you recognize when others might be using these techniques inappropriately. This knowledge protects you from manipulation while helping you communicate more effectively with integrity. The most powerful influence comes from genuinely understanding and serving others' needs while expressing your ideas with psychological sophistication. Chapter 15. Putting it all together. Your Articulation Mastery Blueprint. Mastering articulation isn't about perfecting individual techniques in isolation. It's about integrating all these skills into a coherent, natural communication style that serves you in every situation. The journey from conscious incompetence to unconscious competence requires a systematic approach to practice, feedback, and continuous improvement. This final chapter provides you with a practical blueprint for developing and maintaining elite-level articulation skills that will set you apart from 99% of communicators. The foundation phase focuses on building awareness and establishing basic habits. Start by recording yourself in various communication situations for 1 week. Listen objectively to identify your current patterns. What filler words do you use most frequently? How often do you pause strategically versus filling silence with meaningless sounds? Do you speak too quickly when nervous or too slowly when uncertain? How clear is your articulation under different conditions? This baseline assessment shows you exactly where to focus your initial improvement efforts. Systematic skill building involves focusing on one core technique at a time until it becomes automatic, then adding the next skill. Week 1 might focus entirely on eliminating your most common filler word. Week 2 could add strategic pausing. Week 3 might incorporate one structural framework, like prep. This sequential approach prevents overwhelm and ensures that each skill becomes solidly integrated before you move to the next challenge. Daily practice routines should include both formal exercises and informal application opportunities. Spend 10 minutes each morning reading challenging passages aloud to improve articulation, precision, and vocal variety. Practice explaining complex topics from your work in simple terms. Record yourself giving mini presentations on subjects you care about. These focused practice sessions accelerate skill development more than relying only on natural conversation opportunities. The feedback loop system involves seeking input from others about your communication effectiveness. Ask trusted colleagues or friends to notice and comment on specific aspects of your communication. I'm working on speaking more slowly and clearly. Would you let me know when I rush through important points? This external feedback helps you develop awareness faster than self-monitoring alone. Situational application means deliberately practicing new skills in progressively challenging contexts. Start with low-stakes conversations where mistakes don't matter. Then gradually work up to high-stakes situations. Practice new techniques during casual social interactions before using them in important business meetings. This progressive approach builds confidence and competence systematically. The integration challenge involves combining multiple skills simultaneously without losing the natural flow of conversation. Initially, focusing on one technique might make your communication feel awkward or artificial. The goal is to practice until these skills become so natural that you can use multiple techniques simultaneously while maintaining authentic, engaging communication. Performance under pressure requires specific preparation and mental training. Identify the situations that challenge your articulation most significantly. Public speaking, difficult conversations, high-stakes negotiations, or technical presentations. Develop specific strategies for maintaining clarity and confidence in these contexts. Practice visualization techniques where you mentally rehearse successful communication in challenging situations. Continuous learning involves staying current with communication best practices and seeking new challenges that stretch your abilities. Read books about communication, watch skilled speakers to analyze their techniques, take courses or workshops to learn new approaches. The best communicators never stop learning and refining their skills. Personal style development means finding ways to apply these techniques while remaining authentically yourself. You don't want to become a robot who perfectly executes communication formulas without personality or warmth. The goal is to enhance your natural communication style with proven techniques that make you more effective while remaining genuinely yourself. Measurement and tracking help you monitor your progress and identify areas for continued improvement. Keep a communication journal where you note successful interactions, challenging situations, and lessons learned. Track specific metrics like how often you use filler words, how well your presentations are received, or how effectively you handle difficult conversations. This data helps you understand your progress and focus your practice efforts. The advanced practitioner phase involves teaching others and seeking increasingly complex communication challenges. When you can explain communication concepts clearly to others, you deepen your own understanding. Look for opportunities to mentor junior colleagues, lead training sessions, or participate in speaking organizations. Teaching forces you to articulate your knowledge more precisely and exposes gaps in your understanding. Maintenance and refinement recognize that articulation mastery is an ongoing process, not a destination. Even expert communicators continue practicing and seeking feedback. Schedule regular communication skill reviews, perhaps quarterly or annually, to assess your current abilities and identify new areas for growth. Communication is too important to allow skills to stagnate or decline through neglect. Technology integration involves adapting your skills to new communication platforms and tools as they emerge. Virtual reality meetings, AI-assisted communication, and other technological developments will continue changing how we communicate. The fundamental principles of clear articulation remain constant, but their application must evolve with changing communication contexts. The ripple effect considers how your improved communication skills impact all areas of your life. Better articulation doesn't just help at work. It improves your relationships, increases your influence in community organizations, enhances your ability to advocate for causes you care about, and helps you express your thoughts and feelings more effectively in all contexts. The skills you develop create positive changes that extend far beyond your initial motivation for improvement. Long-term mastery requires understanding that exceptional communication ability is one of the highest leverage skills you can develop. It amplifies every other talent you have and opens doors that would otherwise remain closed. Great ideas poorly communicated have little impact, while modest ideas clearly articulated can change the world. Your investment in communication mastery will pay dividends throughout your entire personal and professional life. The ultimate goal is unconscious competence, where excellent articulation becomes so natural that you don't have to think about it. Your words flow clearly and persuasively because you've trained your mind and practiced the techniques until they become automatic. At this level, you can focus entirely on your content and your audience while trusting that your articulation skills will serve you effectively in any situation. Remember that joining the top 1% of communicators isn't about perfection. It's about consistent application of proven principles with authentic care for your audience's needs and interests. When you combine technical skill with genuine desire to serve others through clear communication, you develop the kind of articulation ability that creates lasting impact and meaningful influence in everything you do.